Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, 4 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. It's an honor to have the Honorable Clifford B. Stearns in the studio with us right now. You might remember Mr. Stearns was a congressman, and the one thing I regret is that I never took him up on his offer to go visit him up in Washington, D.C. Now I have to visit him at his living room here in Ocala. Or even the studio at WOCA. Cliff Stearns is here. He's an author, by the way. I don't know if you have a copy of his book, but go get it. It's called Life in the Marble Palace, In Praise of Folly. It's his memoir, and I love biographies, and I love autobiographies, and I'm never clear what the difference is between a memoir and an autobiography. I was told that a memoir is your memories, and an autobiography is when you actually do research on yourself. I don't know if that's true or not. Good morning,
Larry. Good morning. I'm delighted to be here. How have you been?
How have you been? I've been good.
I'm doing well. There's a nice article in today's paper. I was up dedicating at the Phoenix House. You know, that's a large center. Mm-hmm. I have about 240 people are being cared for to help them with their addiction, whether it's alcohol or drugs, and it's a beautiful campus. And I was dedicating their fitness center that I donated to. My wife and I, they put up a nice plaque in behalf of us, and it's a nice little article in today's paper. And so
nice. I'm
pleased to be able to help out in my local community.
You've been dedicated to public service all your life. You served in the Air Force. And,
that's true.
And how much time passed between leaving the Air Force and entering Congress?
Well, that's a good question, Larry. I left the Air Force in 67, 68, and then I moved to Florida in 1976. And so, and I got elected in 88. So, you're looking probably at from, let's say, 68, 78, 20 years. I was in private sector, and 4 years in the Air Force, and then 24 as a congressman.
And you listening to the Congress talk to Mark, what's his name, Zuckerberg?
Zuckerberg?
You have to wonder, did any of them ever work in the private sector?
Oh, I don't know. That's.
Am I being harsh on them by asking that question? It seemed like they were having a hard time understanding how he made money.
Well, I can understand how he made money. He just came up with an incredible social media product that now has billions of people on. And unfortunately, Larry, it's interesting. When I was in Congress, I chaired the Commerce, Consumer Protection, and Trade Committee of Energy and Commerce, and they had jurisdiction over the Federal Trade Commission. And what that means is all the Internet is through the Federal Trade Commission. That is the protection for consumers. And frankly, I had a privacy bill that passed the subcommittee and the full committee, but never got on the House floor, which would allow people, before things would happen to them, they'd be have the opportunity to opt in. Mm-hmm. And the privacy bill I had was very, shall we say, comprehensive, yet at the same time not regulatory. And it pushed to the FTC more jurisdiction. And frankly, a lot of things that happen on Facebook, if the users were told that they had to opt in before it occurred, they might have the privilege and opportunity to say, I'm not going to go forward.
Yes.
But this opt in, and then after you decide not to opt in, you can opt in a gradual way or opt in and not at all. But I think consumers, if their information is being used, should have the right to get either reimbursed or decide they don't want to do it. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But Facebook's making all this money by taking all our information on Facebook, selling it to advertising companies, and using our information and deciding, well, Larry or Cliff are interested in golf, or they're interested in swimming and fishing, and so we're going to barrage their webpage on Facebook with all these ads, and they find out our predilections, what we like and what we don't like from our Facebook, and lo and behold, they start to sell stuff to us. And at the same time, we have not allowed this because we thought it was just going to our family.
Yeah. So when you watch the news and Congress comes up, you have a totally different perspective than most of the rest of us.
Well, I'm sure, everybody has their own opinion when it comes to politics, and that.
But I mean, you know how it works, and maybe
I do.
some of us don't understand that. We just know the issues, or at least we think we do.
Well, I think there's a certain subtlety and nuance that perhaps I understand that the average American or the average citizen does not. And I think to a large extent, what's happening in Congress is a inability to compromise, an inability to see the big picture, which is the survival of the United States, both from a fiscal standpoint as well as from a military standpoint, as well as from an immigration standpoint. We obviously cannot drop our guard and let anybody and everybody into this country, because there's billions and billions of people who would like to come to the United States. In fact, Larry, there's 5 million people registered with the National Immigration Service waiting to come into this country legally. And then you top on that of all these people that will come here illegally. It is very disconcerting to think that this country has more and more illegal aliens coming in here who, in the end, many of them, probably 20 to 30% of them, are criminals. And when you think that they're coming in here illegally, they are increasing the prospect for more violence in this country. So to answer your question, there are some things that I know either from being a Republican for that long and watching how the legislative process works and working through, 4 different presidents and seeing their errors as well as their successes. So I have a little perspective that can be helpful, I think.
And the news doesn't tell the public what you just said about all of these people that are coming in here legally, that they're waiting to become U.S. citizens. They just focus on the illegals.
That's right. They talk about DACA, and they want to be able to give these 800,000, it could be 1.2 million, as Trump indicated. He wants to give 1.2 million in DACA, these people that came here as children, and they were raised by a family that was from illegally status in the United States, and they want to give them citizenship. And I think there's a compromise here, but in the end, we have to protect our borders, and if we don't protect our borders, this great America we have today will decline.
Yeah. When David Letterman, the entertainer, retired,
right?
After Trump was elected, he made some kind of statement. He made the biggest mistake of his life getting out of TV when Trump was president. Do you have any wishes that you could be in Congress while Trump is in president? Maybe for different reasons than David Letterman, because he's obviously not a Trump supporter.
Right, I know.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting question. I have not ruled out running again. There's a good possibility I might do that in the future.
Oh my gosh, really?
But on the other hand,
is that an exclusive? Did you just tell our audience for the first time?
No, I've always said that you never say never. I think the problem when you leave Congress is you have so many opportunities to affect not only legislatively but public opinion, but not only in your congressional district and in the state, but you can go on the House floor and you can speak, and it can be picked up by Wall Street Journal or the Washington. You lose this ability. The story is I'm in Home Depot and a woman comes up to me, and I'm sure she's going to recognize who I am, and she's going to say, Mr. Stearns, you did a great job, and we appreciate your service. But in the end, she comes up to me and says, "Didn't you used to be somebody?"
Oh.
And so,
oh my gosh.
No matter how long you serve, the public soon forgets, which is in a larger sense, Larry, is what we want this country to be. We want a country that we have public servants who leave the service and then they go back and are in the legal framework of the regular citizen and participating and not exploiting their office, and at the same time being under the same laws as everybody else, and that's what we want.
I don't know the real definition of a statesman, but I always think of you as a statesman. And is that, you take that as a compliment?
I do take that as a compliment because I was willing to compromise. At the same time, I had a very strong conservative Christian record, but at the same time, I realized, just like the founders did in 1970, 1787 when they came up with a great compromise to sign the Constitution. Without it, we wouldn't have had a Constitution. So I think members of Congress got to realize you got to work both sides of the aisle. You got to listen to both sides. You cannot degrade anybody personally because of their views.
Yeah.
And in the end,
that is one area I disagree with the president on. I wish he would stop doing that.
Yeah, the personal attacks really debase the debate, because it's difficult to debate with a person if you're attacking him personally, because then they start attacking you personally, and no one's listening to each other. And without that listening and empathizing with the other person, you can't understand a compromise. And frankly, in the free enterprise system, when I go to sell my house or I go to sell my car, it's a negotiation. It's a compromise.
There you go.
If I put my product up for sale and it doesn't sell on eBay, I sometimes have to drop the price, and that's a compromise. So I think American politicians should realize that it can't be all their way, and that there is a sense that this country's survival is dependent upon credible compromise.
Yeah, I wish you were still there.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I enjoy. I'm working in Washington at APCO Worldwide, which is a large communication PR company, and I am the executive director of, and I deal with about 6 different clients, and so I'm also a lobbyist. So I go up on the Hill, and I'm a registered lobbyist, and I talk to my clients, my former members of Congress, and I don't really sell or really hard sell. I go up and just try to educate. So I don't really think of myself as a lobbyist, but as somebody trying to educate that member of Congress on our clients' needs, and then I let the congressman decide, because I've had so many lobbyists come in and try to hard sell me, and that didn't work, because as a member of Congress, you want to hear both sides. So if you came up and you had one opinion and I had another, the congressman should listen to both of us and have the patience to listen and tolerance, and then make his own decision. So that's all I try to do.
And you always took pride, and you still do take pride in your work ethic. You would come here to our community and have hours to meet the people. You would always be up there in Washington when everything was in session. You never weren't there, and I think that's a problem too with the people in Congress now. They seem to not be there as much as they are required to be.
Well, I did 652 town meetings, and so I see now many members of Congress do no town meetings. They do them all electronically from their office in Washington, and I think that's wrong, because they have to get out and see the people. And then secondly, constituents can come into your office, but sometimes it's easier to go to a town meeting and meet with your staff and get problems solved. Or if they're not solved, you can confront the congressman and say, how come this hasn't been solved? And every town meeting, I would say, everybody raise their hand who sent a letter to me requesting help. They all raised their hand. I said, how many did not receive an answer? And invariably, no one raised their hand.
Well, that's a great thing to be able to claim,
And I would like members of Congress to do that when they start a town meeting, and then ask them how many people have not taken care of. And because in the end, you serve the people here, and it's a high honor to be on the board of this most powerful country.
Right.
And you should got to get back to your constituents and tell them that I care, how can I help you, and I'm here to serve.
I said to Robin, our business is to try to make people laugh. So I said to Robin one time on the air, I said, if we went to Congress, and I just stood up and I said, hey, what time is it? Whoever can give me the time of the day, that's the person I like.
Well, I've been in a hearing where the BP oil spill, the CEO testified. I asked him a question because he never answered any question. It was always equivocating.
Oh, really?
And then I did too. That I said, well, just tell me, Mr. Conyers, what is today's date?
Just so you get an answer,
I'm trying to get an answer from him, because this BP, the spill, he was just and he was scared what to say because he's concerned of the litigation.
Did you have a different treatment from local media than you did from national media when you were in Congress?
Well, no, most of the media is liberal. So, I'm a strong pro-life, and I'm strong pro-defense, and I believe in the Christian tradition in this country and protection of the the ability to be in the public square to talk about how your feelings are religious-wise. So for the most part, the media would deal with me in the sense that I was a strong conservative, and they would, shall we say, not give balanced treatment. But I could go on use my own mailing from Congress to get my own opinion out, because they give you so much franking, so you can mail.
Yeah.
So I would send out every year an end of the year report.
I think we got a couple of pieces. From
I'm sure you did. All the constituents complain about the mailing, but actually, as in my particular case, is my way to get my opinion out, as well as some of the legislative accomplishments, because the local press here in Ocala Stearns would never care. I mean, I passed the Millennium Healthcare Bill when I was in Veterans, which I served for 24 years, and I never got any press on it here locally.
Right? Wow.
And it was a major piece of legislation that Bill Clinton, President Clinton, signed, and it really transformed the veterans health care in terms of providing more service through nurses, and also providing more research dollars. And I had another big piece of legislation dealing with rare diseases that allowed the FDA to shorten the clinical period for care for those families who are looking for medication that was costing $50,000 a year. But I mean, all I can say is that I had the ability to get this out myself, and I didn't depend upon the Ocala Star banner.
Do you know, if you went back, you starting to look like Clint Eastwood a little bit. That might work in your favor. I don't know.
I like that.
So tell me.
So the next time the woman says, "Who are you?" I'll tell her I'm Clint Eastwood.
Just light a cigarette or a crooked cigar, and say, "I don't know."
No, an e-cigarette today.
Oh, an e-cigarette.
An e-cigarette.
That's called the human locomotive.
Is that what it's called?
Well, I see them out here all the time. They look like locomotives.
I know. There's so much smoke coming out.
So much comes out of them. It's unbelievable, right?
Vaporizing. Oh, boy.
All right, so I started off talking about your memoir, and
right.
I also mentioned that I never really understood the difference between a memoir and an autobiography.
Yeah.
And I said, what I thought I heard is that a memoir is your memories. An autobiography, you actually do research on yourself. I would have to do that because I forget everything. So
no, I think you're right. This is more of a memoir. I talk about the activities I did in Congress. I tell about the pros in Congress, and I have in the title "In Praise of Folly," and that's the title of a book written by Erasmus in the 16th century, and he was one of the most notable philosophers, and his book was a work of the Renaissance, and it was really the catalyst for the Protestant Reformation. So I talk about things in Washington and the Great Marble House that is folly, and that either under the Bush administration or under the Clinton administration was wrong. And I try to point out that we need to change some of those things. And I have criticism on Speaker Gingrich. I have criticism on Dennis Hastert. Of course, as you know, Dennis Hastert went to jail for perjury. But I have a chapter on Gingrich and what he tried to do during the impeachment of Bill Clinton.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And then I have a chapter dealing with Hank Paulson, who was Secretary of Treasury, who gave away almost $1 trillion to Wall Street instead of to the homeowners, and allowing the banks to change the mortgage rates, interest rates, and to give, shall we say, help to the homeowners during the recession of 2007. And he gave it all to Wall Street. He bailed out AIG, and he bailed out the Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. And so I point this out in this book that this is a shadow government that oftentimes moves adversely to the American people. And that's all outlined in this book, and I think in all deference to Trump, I think he's right in many respects. There is a shadow government that seems to operate divorced from the people, and certainly divorced from Congress, because we were scared to death about the recession, and we were scared so much that we approved this $1 trillion. Then 10 days later, Paulson, the Secretary of Treasury, switched it. He baited us in and then switched it and gave it to Wall Street.
Oh, my.
The speak softly and carry a big stick.
Yeah.
We attribute that to Teddy Roosevelt. I think there's somebody else who people say said it first, but the whole philosophy of doing that, I mean, you embody that philosophy. Carrying a big stick, perhaps, is part of what President Trump is about, but he definitely doesn't speak softly.
No,
do we need that now? I mean, do we need somebody who speaks bolsterously? Is that the word I'm looking for?
Well, I think obviously Trump is tweeting in a not a prudent way, and I think anybody who watches and listens to his tweets on a daily basis has to be concerned, because some of the decisions he makes has to be thought carefully, and secondly, he has to consult a lot of people who have expertise, and you don't tweet out until you've talked to those people.
Yes. Now you are, in a way, like him. I mean, you were in the private sector, and then you were in the public sector.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe he was in the private sector so long that he just doesn't understand that the public sector works differently. Is that possible?
I think it's true. Because he is a billionaire, and I think he has sort of autonomy from maybe the average person that has a mortgage of $100,000 or $80,000, and he probably can't relate to the people of Marion County, who, for the most part, have an average income well below the national average. Mm-hmm. And so you have to, before you tweet, you have to think in terms of all the people of America. And you have so many great, competent people working in government as career in the State Department, as well as the Justice Department, as well as the Defense Department. And I would think before you tweet, you want to consult with all those people, get the best learning that you can, and then carefully make your decisions, but make them in a prudent way.
Tell us a story of an adversary that you became friends with.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm also president, Larry, of the United States Association of Former Members of Congress, which is a remarkable association. We have about 11 employees. We do about $3 million in revenue. Nothing comes from the government. We all do it privately. There's 450 members of the House and 100 of the senators, and I had the great honor and privilege to be president of this prestige organization. Wow, nice. And it's a 2-year cycle as a Republican. Then we have a Democrat take over. And my vice president is Martin Frost. Now, Martin Frost is from Texas, and he was head of the DCCC. Now, the DCCC is a National Democratic Congressional Committee to fundraise against Republicans.
Okay.
So they would spend $85 million a year in a 2-year cycle to try and take out Republicans.
Gotcha, yeah.
So he was the arch rival. But he's now the vice president of our association, and I work with him on a regular basis. Lots of times we don't agree on obviously on the politics, but we do agree on trying to make the association fulfill its mission, which is civic education, teaching at our high schools and colleges, and also working through the European Union, Japan, South Korea, and Germany as the congressional outreach programs. We bring in their members of parliament. We do a lot of panels and discussions on the Hill with members of Congress. We set up receptions and dinners with embassy people and ambassadors. But the basic mission is to educate Americans, and particularly young students, on the importance of being a public servant and providing active understanding of the issues.
Robin and I had Thanksgiving in New York City at the Francis Tavern, and that's where George Washington had his retirement party.
Oh,
Are you
really?
familiar with it by chance?
I am not, but I'm glad to hear about it.
So when you go there,
it's a museum too.
You
really
say
nice.
to yourself, "Can you imagine the conversations in here?" He probably had guys that he just disagreed with totally, but they had one common goal, which was to make this country as great as it could
Well,
be.
Thomas Jefferson came after him, talked about he was selling out, he and John Adams and
I think they were all there at the party.
And Hamilton, and Jefferson, his whole, when he ran for president, was to try and create a agrarian society and get away from big government.
Yes. I wanted to show you a picture if I can.
Sure.
I went to the men's room.
Oh, did you?
In the tavern, yeah. Yes, I did. That's a funny way to start this conversation. And there was a device in the men's room. I'll look for the photo.
A
later.
device? What kind of device?
Like a wooden thing, like something you see from like the early America.
Really?
Yeah, and so I came out and I said to Robin's son, what was that thing in the bathroom? And he goes, "What thing?" I said, "You didn't see the thing, the big device?" He goes, "No." So we went back in. He came out and he said, "I don't know what it is." So I
I'll
said
be doggone.
to Robin, too bad you can't go in there. So I thought, wait a minute, I can take a picture of it.
Sure.
So I took a picture of this thing, and I showed it to Robin and to Robin's daughter-in-law, and nobody knows what it is. So the waitress comes over. I say, can you tell me, what is this thing in the men's room? So she looks at it. Oh, that's a cork bottler invented by Thomas Jefferson.
What bottle?
A bottle corker.
A bottle corker.
Yeah, it put the cork into the bottle. This big old wooden thing, and the whole job it had was put a cork in a bottle.
In the men's room.
In the men's room, yeah. Well, I guess they had to put
a torture device, where
it did. It looked like something that would hurt somebody, but yeah.
That is extraordinarily anachronistic. I mean, it's so old, and to do something so simple.
Isn't that cool?
And it's in the men's room.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you're ever in New York City, go near Wall
Francis.
Street. There's the Francis, yeah.
I'll do that. I've been to Wall Street. I've never heard of it, so I'm glad you told me.
You'll love it.
I'm gonna
and
see.
everything. It's great. We really enjoy your book because you give us a lot of insights, and it's not just textbook things. There's a lot of emotion and feeling involved in your writing as well.
I try, it is such an inspiring way to be employed, to be a congressman. And so
I bet it is.
I really, a lot of people say, members of Congress have low poll ratings, and I understand that, but it is a magnificent opportunity to do good, and at the same time to meet so many other very talented individuals, men and women, who that have extraordinary backgrounds. And so it's a life-changing event, I think, for anybody who gets elected to Congress, and I would recommend anybody who, like any interest in running, should run, because it takes courage to run, and at the same time, win or lose, you're a winner because you took the opportunity to try.
Absolutely, yeah.
Boy, that is unusual.
I just showed you.
It almost looks like a guillotine.
It does. It does.
I just showed Congressman Stearns. I can't not call you that. So I just showed Congressman Stearns the photo I was referring to. We hardly talked about your book. It is a marvelous book. I read it. It's been a year ago, I think. I don't know.
I think it has been a year.
Life in the Marble Palace in Praise of Folly, written by the Honorable Clifford B. Stearns, a guy that we are proud to call our friend. And if you ever do run for office again and you say, Larry, come up to my office. Is this picture taken from your office?
That's taken from the what I looked out every morning when I came into my office. Either the patina on the house, on the Congress cupola there is just extraordinary, because it would change throughout the day, and particularly at night when the lights lit up and the Senate and the House was in session. So I just put that on the book, and I think it's just a beautiful, beautiful picture. And of course, that's really the theater and, shall we say, temple of democracy. And that building is on a hill, prominent hill in Washington, D.C. that can be seen everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I think all Americans look to it for freedom.
Well said. Nice. Me too. Congressman, thank you so much for coming in here today. And
thank you, Larry and Robin. Thanks. It's always good to come here, and I'll have to come back and we can talk more about the issues, what's happening in Syria, or perhaps what's happening in the Asian area, particularly with China.
Yeah,
and trade.
There's so much. There's so much. If you want to get the book, it's all over wherever books are sold, right?
You can get it at Amazon. You can get it off of Barnes & Noble. And, of course, my webpage for my book is cliffordstearns.com. So they can buy it there easily enough. And sometimes it's discounted, so, But I appreciate you having me on.
If you just squint your eyes a little bit and say, make my day, I'm telling you, you have become Clint Eastwood. You make my day.
There you go. Make my day.
Thank you, Congressman. We'll be right back. This is The Source, WOCA.
Here is your 1-minute news brief. The Florida Highway Patrol is reporting that a 66-year-old motorcyclist has died from injuries sustained in a traffic accident on County Road 25A near Lowell Correctional Institution. The Alachua County Sheriff's Office is reporting the arrest of a 50-year-old man on manslaughter charges for failure to provide life-saving care to his 93-year-old father at his home. Walmart plans to spend $200 million on renovations in Florida as part of a plan for innovations that include scan and go to skip the checkout line. A 35-year-old female teacher at a Fort Myers Christian school has been